Do you remember seek and find books, where you search for an object like a comb or starfish in what looks like a collage of objects? My preschool daughter loves these books, though hers revolve around Minnie Mouse and other Disney characters. Finding the hidden objects for the first time might be challenging, but after that, it is a snap for her. Now when she opens the pages to the book, she can immediately point to the hidden pictures. The objects seem so obvious now, it's hard not to imagine finding them. I had a similar experience with today's first reading from Genesis, the familiar story of God placing the rainbow in the sky as a promise to Noah to never flood the earth again. When I was invited to preach for today, one suggestion was to reflect on how in this reading, the covenant incorporated not just Noah and his human family, but all living creatures. That, in all of my Catholic upbringing, was not something I had noticed. I had always thought the rainbow was just for us humans. Of course, once I read the passage through this new lens, it was impossible not to see that all creatures were included in God's plan for salvation. This is actually emphasized 4 times, that God has made a covenant with all of creation, quote, all the birds and the various tame and wild animals. Indeed, the passage is a beautiful reminder of how deeply interconnected we are with all living beings, human and non-human. All creatures are seen with love in the eyes of God, enough for them to be mentioned by name in this covenanted relationship that we remember each time we see a bow in the sky. And we know that God has kept God's promise. And we also know that the seas are rising. But this time, it is because we have not kept our part of the covenant in honoring the gift of creation. Due to the burning of fossil fuels for transportation and our overconsumption of natural resources for food and development, we have shifted the balance of our earth, and as a result, the climate is warming, ice caps are melting, and seas are rising. And those most impacted are those who least contributed. People from island nations like Tuvalu, Fiji, and as we've seen here in Puerto Rico, are being forced to flee like Noah due to the encroaching tides or to the destruction caused by natural disasters. If we look deep within our hearts, we all can probably admit that we are complicit in this sin of harming creation. Whether it's the exhaust from our cars or owning more things than we simply need, we are a part of this problem. Yes, it's good to acknowledge our sin, but we don't need to fall into a guilt trip. Instead, we might consider awareness of the ways that we have fallen short in caring for creation as a wake-up call for personal ecological conversion. The Jesuit priest Anthony de Mello once wrote, "Be grateful for your sins. They are carriers of grace." In his encyclical Laudato Si on care for our common home, Pope Francis says that the external deserts in our world are growing because the internal deserts have become so vast. We are, as the old country song goes, looking to find love in all the wrong places. Many of us get caught up in retail therapy and get roped into the consumer culture, which then leads to the overconsumption of our natural resources. The antidote, Pope Francis says in Laudato Si, is that, quote, we need to take up an ancient lesson found in different religious traditions and also in the Bible. It is the conviction that less is more. A constant flood of new consumer goods can baffle the heart and prevent us from cherishing each thing and each moment. To be serenely present to each reality, however small it may be, opens us to much greater horizons of understanding and personal fulfillment. It is a return to that simplicity which allows us to stop and appreciate the small things, to be grateful for the opportunities which life affords us, to be spiritually detached from what we possess, and not to succumb to sadness for what we lack. Pope Francis is speaking of a desert spirituality, one of simplicity, where just like Jesus in the gospel, our dependence is on the angels and God and not on our own possessions. It is an invitation of trust, of simplicity. It is also a perfect invitation for Lent, to take up the ancient lesson that less is more, to stop and appreciate the small things. What might this mean even more concretely in Lent? You might consider not buying anything unnecessary during Lent, or eating less meat, not just on Fridays, taking more time to pray in nature, to look at the ways, especially using our digital devices, that we often distract ourselves from just living in the present moment, or to eat out less and instead use that money to give to a local charity or environmental group. This desert spirituality is actually not only a path to better fulfill our covenant with creation and with God, it is also a path of true joy and contentment. The antidote isn't just good for the environment, it's also good for the soul. In an article in the Greater Good Science Center titled, "Why Lent Makes People Happy and Netflix Doesn't," it reports of a study that gathered a bunch of people at the beginning of the week and asked them to eat chocolate at the end of the week. Now, they told some of the people not to eat any chocolate the whole week. And then they told another group that they could eat as much chocolate as they wanted. And then a third group wasn't given any instructions. So guess who was the happiest at the end of the week when they ate chocolate? Yes, the ones who were told to fast from chocolate. And the people who had been eating chocolate to their heart's desire? In fact, the article reports, the bingers reported feeling less happy after the end of week chocolate than they'd felt after eating their piece at the start of the week. Getting everything we want isn't the key to happiness. What is the key to happiness is realizing how wonderful what we have really is. Lent is a time to enter the desert, to enter into a time of simplicity, of paring down what we accumulate, what we want, and to rest in the truth that God will always provide exactly what we need. This indeed is the grace needed for our planet and also for ourselves.